So now
Yes.
that all of that is done,
Yes.
uh, and we're approaching time,
Uh-huh.
I will cut here and then we'll go into this part where we introduce the story consultant and script consultant and also person who I forced to be my writing mentor, Bryan Howe. So I'll give you a second, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about how you got here.
All right. Hi, my name is Bryan Hull. I guess I'd call myself a semi-professional screenwriter. I cut my teeth writing scripts for video games for about 10 years. I worked at Xbox for a few years. I worked at LucasArts for a few years. And a lot of video game writing is very similar to screenwriting. A lot of it uses the same screenplay format and a lot of the same approaches. We read a lot of the same books and follow a lot of the same models. But I've always enjoyed writing, and screenwriting was something that really appealed to my interest in voice. I think character voice and the idiosyncrasies of a character's voice and how it reveals character are the parts of writing that I enjoy the most. And so screenwriting, I think, really plays into that. So,
Yeah. That sort of dove into the next part of it, which
all
were
right.
what are your skills? Your skills are being the best writer I have ever read their stuff. And I say that not facetiously. Very
Well, I
much so when
appreciate.
I had first started, your Athelstane script was the only script that I had the attention span to be able to sit down, start, and then finish without leaving. Everyone else, I would read 5 to 10 pages and be like, God damn it, have to leave and come back. And that's even fucking Kaufman.
Oh,
Kaufman, I
uh-huh.
would say, as far as like professional screenplays, I
Hmm.
really enjoy his stuff because it's
Yeah, I
almost
do too.
poetry on page in a way.
Hmm.
I have to stop reading Kaufman's scripts to
Hmm.
regather and refocus. But yours have always been very entertaining and very
Mine are
like,
very simplistic.
yeah,
No,
we
I
see
mean it's
what's happening.
funny. It's funny because I think for me, as much as it's not necessarily cool to say this in screenwriting circles, like I've never necessarily been the person who wants to write the next Academy Award winning 3 hour magnum opus that makes you cry all every 5 minutes. Like I've always been the person who grew up on the movies that were playing on cable in the 80s. And so for me, like that's cinema. Like the idea of not that I don't appreciate and watch and consume and try to steal ideas from more highfalutin stuff, but in my heart of hearts, like I'm a 1980s mid budget action comedy writer, right? Like I would be writing things like Ghostbusters and Stripes and Beverly Hills Cop. Like those to me are those are the movies that make me happy to be in a movie theater. So when I'm writing, the goal is not just to write a good story, but to write a good time for the reader.
The best out of all the scripts I've read, I think the best and think the thing that made me laugh the loudest really quickly was your homage to the old B horror, where it was like she stood there with a "Where the fuck have you been?" look, and then she said word for word, "Where the fuck have you been?" And I laughed so hard in the middle of a lobby, like clinic lobby, where I was waiting to be seen, and all these people just turn and see me looking at my phone and laughing. Not my proudest moments, but I loved it.
I'm glad it landed. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's when I'm writing, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but I try to write the scripts that I would want to read or that
Yeah.
for the movies that I'd want to see, right? And so a lot of my stuff is pastiche or parody or send up of existing genres or older genres. And for that one, it was like, yeah, sci-fi, like a B sci-fi movie. But I also love, like, I genuinely love those types of movies. And so I'm not making fun of them in a mean spirited way. And I'm not trying to put them down. I'm not trying to like make less of them. I'm trying to make more of them. And part of that is taking these old tropes and these old cliches and these old genre tricks and kind of pulling the brakes on them and then forcing the viewer or the reader to take a longer look at them and be like, wait a minute, if that was real life, like that's not how that would happen. And trying to kind of shine a light on some of the things that we just gloss over when we're watching or reading stories. And it's just, to me, that's just fun. It's just like I like taking things and inverting them and just twisting them around.
So with that, I will pivot. I know you talked about how you were an 80s kid, you loved watching those movies. When did you decide that writing was what you wanted to do?
um writing with like a big capital W, very, very early. Like when I was a little kid, I used to have, my dad had brought home this giant IBM electric typewriter. And when you powered it on, it sounded like going back to movies, you turn it on, it sounded like a proton pack from Ghostbusters. It was like, when you just like, it had this like very satisfying hum. It was beige. And I would type stories on paper, and I would type on the bottom half of the paper, and then I would draw pictures in the top half of the paper. And so I used to just do that for fun. That's what I did. And then growing up, I loved comic books. I loved just reading in general. So I would write my own comic books. I'd write my own little books and stuff. Screenwriting was something that I came to a little bit later, but I was always a drama nut in high school. I was one of the drama geeks. And so I loved acting. I loved being a ham. I loved improv. I love stand-up routines. And working in a medium that was very kind of visual and voice driven was really interesting to me. So I toyed with it throughout my, I don't know, 20s, I guess. And then when I had the chance to work in the video game industry, I saw an opening where I could move from what I was doing, which was basically writing manuals for video games, and try to drive into more and more narrative stuff. And so I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to get onto more and more projects. And the more I did, the more luckily I bumped into people that knew better than me and could show me the ropes and break some of my bad habits, and just try to learn like bit by bit.
With the bumping into people that know better than me, the next question on my list is, how do we know each other? Oh no, you froze. You froze right as I was about to admit it. Oh, there, you're back.
Here I am.
So the next question on my list was the how do we know each other? And the funny thing, and probably terrible thing to admit, is when we were part of the organization beforehand, I had looked at the list of notable people in there, and I read through it all. And at the time, I was writing for the indie game company, and there were a couple games that I won't mention because I don't want to embarrass them that were not good, that I had consulted with them for in a way to try and improve it. And then they got so disheartened by what I had said that they kind of just dissolved. But I had looked through that and I saw your name and I saw that you had the history with game writing and everything else like that. And part of me joining the organization was I need to meet this guy because I have to ask him questions.
That's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've never admitted that.
So you've been stalking me.
Basically. Okay. So that's why I joined the the scene analysis thing. At the time, I think there were several weeks that you had been preoccupied with a lot of work stuff going on.
Yeah.
So it was a waiting game. Not that I didn't learn a lot from it.
You're just lying and like hiding in the bushes, waiting for me to appear at the watering hole. Yeah. Okay.
Basically. And then when Athelstane came up, I was like, I definitely need to reach out because this is an amazing script. Blah blah blah. And then again, I sort of forced you into reading dozens of not great scripts and giving me notes to try and help me improve.
Well, I mean, so, if this is the Mutual Admiration Society, I think one of the things that made me happy to work with you and give you feedback was that, I think you just had kind of like people have a voice or they don't have a voice. And I think there's a lot of technique and stuff that you can learn about writing, but I feel like a voice is one of those things that either comes or it doesn't. And I felt like you had a voice. And so that was part of it. But part of it was also you actually took feedback. And I can't tell you how many writing groups I've been in that you can give feedback to people. And it's like trying to spoon feed feedback into a brick wall. Like people don't want to listen. They want to defend their ideas. They don't want to consider other viewpoints. And that just gets really disheartening after a while because it's not just like, oh, well, they don't listen to me and I'm smart and they should listen to me because I'm so smart. It's not that. It's that you as a reader or someone who's giving feedback have spent time like reading stuff and making notes and thinking about stuff if you're being conscientious about it. And so for you to do all that work and then be like, hey, here's what I think, and then be like, no, and toss it over their shoulder, you can only go through that so many times before you stop wanting to give feedback to people. So having someone who is like interested in actually learning, whether or not like my idea was the idea or the right idea or whatever, just the idea that you could talk to a person and they would think about what you said and maybe take it and go in a completely different direction. But they would think about what you said and actually incorporate the thinking into their process. Was kind of a breath of fresh air, honestly. So yeah, no, I was happy to make your acquaintance.
Good. Definitely, I was glad to have met you at the baby writer phase
Mhm.
because it definitely helped me scope out what notes had good air to it and which ones didn't.
Mhm.
It was also really good for me to be mutually reviewing people's work in that analysis group because I knew I very much so had a lot of difficulty, like I just did, finding the words to express what it was that I was thinking and feeling in those
Yeah,
moments.
sure.
And I would always say something, and another person would come in and immediately be like, "No, that's not the case. This is it." And then you would come in and say what I had said in better ways that were understood. And in my mind, I was like, I know that I've got like the thread. I just have to keep pulling, and then eventually I'll, you know,
Yeah, I
to do
mean,
X, Y, and Z.
it's tricky. I mean, it's tricky. Giving feedback is itself, I think, an art, and I was definitely not great at it when I started. And um, one of the best pieces of feedback that I ever got was from a writer that I worked with named Eric Nyland at Microsoft at Xbox Studios. And he read one of my scripts and he said, "You write great dialogue and you write too much of it."
That sounds
And
familiar.
that it was one of those notes that really stuck with me because he, the brilliant thing about it was that he was being supportive and critical at the same time, right? He wasn't like, "Your dialogue sucks, stop writing it." He wasn't like, "Hey, you write too much shitty dialogue." He was like, "You write great dialogue and you write too much of it." And that let me internalize the feedback in a way that didn't damage my little baby writer ego, which was very, very delicate, especially when I was starting out. I think for most people it is. And the other thing that he gave me, which was a really good piece of feedback about giving and receiving feedback, and this might be a note I've given you too. When someone gives
Yeah.
you feedback, shut up and listen. Don't defend, don't explain, don't blah, blah, blah. Like you say thank you, and then you listen to what they say, and you say, "That's great feedback, thank you." And then you go back later on your own time, and then you can chew on it, and then you can process it, then you can like decide whether it's bullshit or not. But at the time, you just are an open book. Like you just let people pour the feedback into you and picking through it.
So it sort of froze for like a half second when you said
Oh,
let the feedback come into you and then
mhm.
blah blah blah. I think it's pretty much so self-explanatory where that was coming from. I
Yeah.
will say as a note to all the viewers out there, even if you were doing what I felt like I was doing and trying to get to the heart of the note to where you understand it, it comes out sounding like you're defensive and it comes out sounding that you're not listening. So just as he said, shut the hell up and listen and say thank you.
I mean, I think it's going to ask questions. Like questions can be
Yeah,
useful, right? If you're like, "Well, did it feel like this or did it feel like that?" Like that can be fine because if you're trying to, like you said, sometimes you do need to pick through what they're saying to
yeah,
understand what they're saying. But anytime you feel the temptation to be like, "Well, what I was trying to do was this," or
yeah.
"No, no, what that character really thought was that," like that's when you're just shutting people's desire to give you feedback down. Like you're just being like, "Don't give me feedback, people, because I already have all the answers. I've thought of all your questions already. I already know what you're going to say. I've got answers for all of that. Like, just fuck off." And that's not what you want.
I will say most of the times that I've given feedback to people, I've been lucky. There's been a few times and a few horror stories that I won't say because they might eventually hear me say it if I do. But the one time that I'd given somebody notes, it was on something that they had made, and they were like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, I did this short. Can you give me notes on it?" And
Mm-hmm.
I gave them the warning that the way that I give notes tends to be I will point out things
Mm-hmm.
and I won't gauge it in a way of like helping people to take the note. I will gauge it in a way
Mm-hmm.
of like, this could have been this doesn't make sense, this should have been this, focus on
Mm-hmm.
this. Uh, and if I see something good, I will point out that something is good. He did
Mm-hmm.
not get anything back that said like, "Oh, this is good." He got a lot of "What
Mm-hmm.
is it supposed to do? I don't understand this." Blah blah blah.
Right.
And then I gave it to him. I was like, "Here's your notes," and he was like, "I just wanted you to tell me that it was cool."
Mm-hmm.
I
But
haven't.
that's not. I mean, that's not asking for notes then,
Yeah,
right? Like that's going. I mean, and there's it's not that there's no room for that. And I've been in that position too, where I'm just like, hey, I just need someone to like tell me I'm not like wasting my time on this.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to tell me it's the best thing that anyone's ever written. You have to tell me it's like Citizen Kane or anything like that. But I just have to feel like there's something here that's worth pursuing.
Yeah.
And that's fine, right? You can get like that kind of positive reinforcement from someone, and that's valuable sometimes. But if you're like, I want notes on this, then you're asking for notes. Like, that's
To wrap up the
notes.
conversation on notes, I will give two universal notes. One, if you have somebody that you introduce as girl, 20 years old, wearing short shorts and knee-high boots, no.
Beautiful and doesn't know it.
Yeah. Or if you have 50-year-old man who's too good to be true talking to 20-year-old girl who listens to punk rock and is quote unquote not like other girls.
Mm,
No.
yeah.
Those are the two universal notes I will give to everyone for free without me reading your script. But moving on from that,
Yes.
onto the project itself.
Yeah.
Why would you put your name at risk by coming aboard this thing?
I don't know what I was thinking. No, I mean, to me, so I will say very candidly, like, one of the things that I struggle with as a writer is getting things done, like actually making stuff and like moving on. Like, I like to daydream, I like to write on stuff, I like to noodle on stuff. Um, and I have not been as good at taking the ball and running it down the field. I think you're exceptional at taking the ball and running it down the field. I think whatever your misgivings or doubts about yourself as a writer are more than made up for by your ability to like move things forward. And for me, the opportunity to be on a project with you where I know you're going to be moving things forward is pretty irresistible. I value your, and if that's all you were doing, like if you were just like a producer and like that's what you did, that would be enough. But the fact that you also bring like a keen story sense to things, you have a thirst for learning, that you're curious about how to do things better, that you work well with other people. Like, there's a lot of different aspects of the project structure, the logistics of the project that are very interesting to me. And it's just like almost like a cherry on top that the story is also just like funny and like a good story and something that I'm interested in working on. So that's kind of my grand answer.
God damn it. You and Susanna, man. You and Susanna. Fucking yeah.
You're crying on me, man.
I'm so happy that you agreed to come aboard this crazy fucking roller coaster that it's been.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of the actual logistics people as well, who are infinitely helpful in getting shit done because God knows without them, I would not know what to do.
Yeah.
We already have like a list of locations and a price that it would cost to film there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
See, that's
it's,
the sort of stuff that to me is just like, you might as well ask me to build a time machine at that point.
yeah. Points of contact with people and everything else. Susanna and Caitlin and I are meeting about the director coming up soon because we have like two people that Susanna knows, one that Caitlin knows, and they're considering reaching out to. It's fucking wild. And it was super fucking wild after, I think after we did that first script review meeting and I looked down and I was like, oh fuck, this is 3 months away. I have to get going. Well, it's been fun. I have one last question.
Yeah, of course.
With all of the things with this project, all of the work and intentions and everything going on with it, what do you hope to achieve through this?
So this is going to sound incredibly corny. I have had a rough few years in my life, some personal stuff that really hit me pretty hard a couple years ago. Um, I have, through this process of dealing with that, tried to learn how to what's called let go of my attachment to outcome, right? Like, just invest my time and energy and heart into things with good intentions and let the chips fall where they may. So while it'd be great to be like, oh yeah, this is going to launch my career, or this is going to make, we're going to make a bunch of money, or we're going to get other projects. Like, for me, it's about the process, right? Like the process of working with you and Susanna and Caitlin and building something interesting and just like trying to make something good, like just being the crafts person that works on something and tries to do a good job with it. And then having faith that that in itself is a rewarding experience, right? And then anything else that happens on top of that, that's gravy and cherries and all that other good stuff that you put on Sundays. Gravy Sundays. Yeah, so that's I can, and like if someone offers us a bunch of money and like fame and fortune and whatever, like of course that's gonna be great. But to me, we make something good and we know it's good by the end of it. That's all I need.
That, not to make everybody else jealous, that might be the best answer so far. Just being in love with the process.
Yeah, I mean the process can be really healing, I think, and I think I need some healing in my life. So for me, it's about putting some good in the world, doing something positive and constructive and creative, and working with people that I like. What else do you need?
Can't ask for anything better.
Yeah, except for lots of money, lots
Well,
and
that
lots.
too. That too. I told Caitlin I was going to threaten all of the networks until somebody eventually buys the show.
It's like that's a good process. Yeah,
Yeah, I might
good
have to
shit.
cut that out, but I probably won't. I'll probably
That'll
leave
be in
it
the
in
blooper
there.
reel.
Yeah, they'll never see it anyway. They won't watch these. I say that. I 100% just had a premonition that like 5 years from now, I'm going to be sitting in an office with somebody and they're like, you want to fucking explain this to me? But yeah, I guess on that note, I will thank you so much for coming aboard and doing these videos with me and just
Sure.
for all of your knowledge and input and help and guidance over the past few years because it's been a fucking crazy ride, man.
I appreciate that. Thanks. It's been great. I'm looking forward to the next few months and seeing what we do.
On that note, I'll stop recording and I'll go try and collect my men cards somewhere.
All right, sounds good.